The question hung in the air like an accusation. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? The disciples stared at the beggar sitting in the dust, and everyone assumed someone must be to blame. But what Jesus said next would shatter everything they believed about suffering, sin, and the purpose of pain. The man had been blind since birth. He had never seen a sunrise, never watched his mother's face, never looked into his own reflection. For decades, he had sat in the same spot near the temple, his calloused hand extended, his voice worn from begging. Alms for the blind, mercy for the afflicted. Most people walked past. Some dropped coins. No one stopped to ask his name. But there was something they didn't know yet. In Jewish tradition, suffering meant sin. Disease was punishment. If you were born blind, someone had sinned, either you in the womb or your parents before conception. It was theology written in stone. Suffering equaled guilt. The blind man wasn't just disabled. He was marked. Evidence of divine judgment. A walking sermon about the consequences of sin. The disciples had asked the question everyone thought but rarely voiced. It seemed logical, theological, obvious. Someone must be responsible. Someone must have failed. The man's darkness must have a moral explanation. Jesus stopped walking. He looked at the blind man, really looked at him, not as a theological problem to solve, but as a person to see. And then he said something that made no sense to anyone listening. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. And this is exactly where everything changed. The disciples froze. What? Neither? Then why was he blind? There had to be a reason. There had to be someone to blame. Suffering without sin violated their entire understanding of how God worked. Jesus continued, his voice steady and sure. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. The words landed like stones in still water. This man hadn't been born blind because of punishment. He'd been born blind for purpose. His 40 years of darkness weren't evidence of failure. They were preparation for a miracle. His suffering wasn't the end of the story. It was the setup. Jesus bent down and did something strange. He spit on the ground. The disciples watched, confused, as he made mud with his saliva, mixing dust and moisture in his hands. It looked messy, undignified, almost offensive. This was supposed to be a holy moment, a display of divine power. Why was he making mud like a child playing in dirt? Then Jesus reached toward the blind man's face. The man flinched. Decades of vulnerability had taught him caution when people approached unexpectedly. But Jesus' touch was gentle. He spread the mud across the man's closed eyelids, covering them completely. "Go," Jesus commanded. "Wash in the pool of Siloam." The blind man stood. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand proof. He didn't need to see Jesus' credentials. Something in that voice carried absolute authority, and more than that, hope. For the first time in 40 years, someone had treated him like he could be healed, rather than simply managed. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. The walk to Siloam was familiar. He'd traveled these streets blind for decades. But today felt different. The mud on his face was drying, cracking slightly as he moved. People stared. Some laughed. A grown man walking through Jerusalem with mud smeared on his eyes looked ridiculous. But he didn't care. Jesus had said, "Wash," so he would wash. The pool of Siloam was filled with spring water, clear and cold. The blind man knelt at the edge, cupped water in his hands, and brought it to his face. He rubbed gently, the mud dissolving, running down his cheeks, dripping from his chin. And then light exploded into his brain. Colors, shapes, movement, water sparkling, sky stretching impossibly far, his own hands, he could see his own hands. The shock was so overwhelming he fell backward, gasping, his mind unable to process the flood of visual information. He was seeing, actually seeing, for the first time in his entire life. But what was truly shocking was what happened next. He ran back through the streets, stumbling because walking required different skills when you could see obstacles. His neighbors saw him coming and couldn't believe it. Isn't this the blind beggar? It looks like him, but it can't be. He was born blind. Maybe it's just someone who looks similar. The man was laughing and crying simultaneously. It's me. I'm the one. I was blind, and now I see. How? The questions came fast. Who healed you? What happened? The man called Jesus made mud, put it on my eyes, told me to wash in Siloam, and when I washed, I received my sight. Where is this Jesus? They demanded. I don't know. The man's voice faltered. He'd never actually seen Jesus. He'd been blind when they met. He'd washed at Siloam alone. The man who'd healed him had vanished, and now that he could see, he couldn't find him. What you've seen so far is nothing compared to what the religious leaders did. News reached the Pharisees. A blind beggar healed? Impossible. And more problematic, it had happened on the Sabbath. Jesus had made mud on the Sabbath. Work was forbidden. Healing was forbidden. This was a violation, not a miracle. They summoned the formerly blind man. The interrogation began. How did you receive your sight? The man repeated his story. He put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see. Some Pharisees shook their heads immediately. This man is not from God. He doesn't keep the Sabbath. But others hesitated. How can a sinner perform such signs? The room divided. Argument erupted. Finally, they turned back to the healed man. What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened. The man's answer was simple, certain. He is a prophet. And then the religious leaders made their biggest mistake. They refused to believe he'd been born blind. Bring his parents. They needed someone to contradict the story, to expose the fraud. This had to be fake. Miracles didn't happen like this, especially not on the Sabbath, especially not through mud and saliva. The parents came, nervous, afraid. Being called before the Pharisees was terrifying. These men had the power to excommunicate, to cut you off from the synagogue, from community, from religious life entirely. Is this your son? Was he born blind? How is it that now he can see? The parents answered carefully. We know he's our son. We know he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. He can speak for himself. They threw their son to the wolves. Fear of excommunication silenced their joy. Better to celebrate privately than risk being cut off publicly. You won't believe what the healed man did next. The Pharisees called him back. Give glory to God by telling the truth. We know this man is a sinner. His response was brilliant, defiant, and unanswerable. Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know: I was blind, but now I see. And this is where his courage became legendary. They kept pushing. What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? The man's patience snapped. I already told you, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? The sarcasm was unmistakable. The room erupted. You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. The healed man stood his ground. Here was a beggar, a man with no religious education, no theological training, no social standing, lecturing the most powerful religious leaders in Jerusalem, and his logic was devastating. Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. What happened next revealed everything about the religious system. They couldn't answer his logic. They couldn't disprove his healing. They couldn't defend their position. So they did what powerless authorities always do. They attacked him personally. You were steeped in sin at birth, they shouted. How dare you lecture us? And then they threw him out, excommunicated, cut off, expelled from the synagogue for defending the man who'd healed him. The religious establishment chose their theology over a miracle, their Sabbath rules over a man's sight, their authority over God's obvious work. But there was something the man didn't know yet, something that would complete his healing. Jesus heard what had happened. He went looking for the man who'd been thrown out for defending him. When he found him, Jesus asked a question that went deeper than physical sight. Do you believe in the Son of Man? The man's response showed his desperate desire for truth. Who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus smiled. You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. The man fell to his knees. Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And then Jesus said something that explained everything. For judgment, I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Some Pharisees who'd been listening asked sarcastically, What? Are we blind too? Jesus' answer cut to the heart. If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. The man born blind could finally see. The religious leaders who'd always seen were revealed as blind. The victim became the victor. The beggar became the believer. The one marked by sin became the proof of God's glory. The lesson in that moment changed everything for everyone watching. Suffering isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes God allows darkness not because of past sin, but because of future glory. Sometimes the question isn't who sinned, but what will God do? The man who'd spent 40 years in darkness now walked in light. Not just physical light, but spiritual truth. He'd lost his place in the synagogue, but gained something infinitely more valuable: sight, purpose, and the presence of the one who'd made him whole. And somewhere in Jerusalem, mud-stained water in a pool, bore silent testimony to the day everything changed. When a man born blind saw for the first time, and religious leaders who'd always seen revealed they'd been blind all along.